Statement the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement on the Strategic Defence and Security Review. There are four things I'd like to say up front. First, this is not simply a cost-saving exercise to get to grips with the biggest budget deficit in post-war history. It is about taking the right decisions to protect our national security in the years ahead. But let me say this, the two are not separate. Our national security depends on our economic strength and vice versa. As our national security is a priority, so defence and security budgets will contribute to deficit reduction on a lower scale than most other departments. Over 4 years, the defence budget will rise in cash terms and fall by only 8% in real terms. And it will meet the NATO 2% of GDP target for defence spending throughout the next 4 years. But this government has inherited a £38 billion black hole in our future defence plans. That is bigger than the entire annual defence budget of £33 billion. Sorting this out is not just vital for tackling the deficit, but vital for protecting our national security. Second, this review is about how we project power and influence in a rapidly changing world. We are the 6th largest economy in the world, and even after this review, we expect to continue with the 4th largest military budget in the world. We have a unique network of alliances and relationships with the United States as a member of the EU and NATO, and as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We have one of the biggest aid programmes in the world, one of the biggest networks of embassies, a time zone that allows us to trade with Asia in the morning and the Americas in the afternoon, and a language that is spoken across the globe. Our national interest requires our full and active engagement in world affairs. It requires our economy to compete with the strongest and the best, and it requires, too, that we stand up for the values that we believe in. Britain has traditionally punched above its weight in the world, and we should have no less ambition for our country in the decades to come. But we need to be more thoughtful, more strategic and more coordinated in the way we advance our interests and protect our national security. And that is what this review sets out to achieve. Third, I want to be clear, there is no cut whatsoever in the support for our forces in Afghanistan. The funding for our operations in Afghanistan comes not from the budget of the Ministry of Defence, but instead from the Treasury Special Reserve. So changes to the Ministry of Defence that result from today's review will not affect this funding. Furthermore, every time the Chiefs of the Defence Staff have advised me that a particular change might have implications for our operations in Afghanistan, either now or in years to come, I have heeded that advice. In fact, we have been and will be providing more for our brave forces in Afghanistan. More equipment to counter the threat from IEDs, more protected vehicles like the Warthog Heavy Protection Vehicle, which will be out there by the end of the year, more surveillance capability, including unmanned aircraft systems, and crucially, at last, the right level of helicopter capability. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, I do believe this review has been different from those that have come before it. It has looked at all of the elements of national security, home and abroad, not just defence on its own. It has been led from the top with all of the relevant people round the table, and crucially, it will be repeated every 5 years. Mr. Speaker, this review sets out a step change in the way we protect this country's security interests, moving from a Ministry of Defence that is too big, too inefficient, too overspent, to a department that is smaller, smarter and more responsible in its spending. From a strategy that is over-reliant on military intervention to a higher priority for conflict prevention. From concentrating on conventional threats to a new focus on unconventional threats. And from armed forces that are overstretched, under-equipped and have been deployed too often and without appropriate planning to the most professional, most flexible modern forces in the world, fully equipped for the challenges of the future. And I want to take each of those in turn, and I will give the honourable gentleman all the figures he requires. First, the Ministry of Defence. Even though the MOD will get real growth in its budget next year, the department will face some significant challenges. So the MOD will cut its estate, dispose of unnecessary assets, renegotiate contracts with industry, and cut its management overheads, including reducing civilian numbers in the MOD by 25,000 by 2015. We will also adjust and simplify civilian and military allowances. The new higher operational allowance stays, but there will be difficult decisions, although these will be made easier by the return of the army from Germany. Together, all these changes in the Ministry of Defence will save £4.7 billion over the spending review period. Getting to grips with procurement is vital. Take the Nimrod programme, for example. It has cost the British taxpayer over £3 billion. The number of aircraft to be procured has fallen from 21 to 9. The cost per aircraft has increased by 200%, and it's over 8 years late. Today, we are announcing its cancellation. Second, from military intervention to conflict prevention. Mr. Speaker, Iraq and Afghanistan have shown the immense financial and human costs of large-scale military interventions. While we must retain the ability to undertake such operations, we must get better at treating the causes of instability, not just dealing with the consequences. When we fail to prevent conflict and have to resort to military intervention, the costs are always far higher. So we will expand our capability to deploy military and civilian teams together to support stabilisation efforts and build capacity in other states, and we will double our investment in aid for fragile and unstable countries, so that by 2015, just under a third of the budget of DFID will be spent on conflict prevention. Third, we need to focus more of our resources not on the conventional threats of the past, but on the unconventional threats of the future. So over the next 4 years, we would invest over £500 million of new money in a national cyber security programme. This will significantly enhance our ability to detect and defend against cyber attacks, and it will fix shortfalls in the critical cyber infrastructure on which the whole country now depends. We will continue to prioritise tackling the terrorist threat, both from Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, and from dissident Republicans in Northern Ireland. Although efficiencies will need to be made, we are giving priority to continuing investment in our world-class intelligence agencies, and we will sharpen our readiness to act on civil emergencies, energy security, organised crime, counter-proliferation and border security. Fourth, and crucially, we need to move from armed forces that are overstretched and under-equipped to the most modern and professional, flexible forces in the world. Now, Mr. Speaker, we inherited an army with scores of tanks in Germany, but that was until recently forced to face the deadly threat of IEDs in Afghanistan with Land Rovers that were designed for Northern Ireland. We have a Royal Air Force hampered in its efforts to support our forces overseas because of an ageing strategic airlift fleet. And we have a Royal Navy that has been locked into a cycle of ever smaller numbers of ever more expensive ships. Mr. Speaker, we can't go on like this. The White Paper we've published today sets out a clear vision for the future structure of our armed forces. The precise budgets beyond 2015 will be agreed in future spending reviews. My own strong view is that this structure will require year-on-year, real terms growth in the defence budget in the years beyond 2015. Between now and then, the Government is committed to the vision of 2020 set out in this review and will make decisions accordingly. We are absolutely determined as well that the Ministry of Defence will become much more commercially hard-headed in future and adopt a much more aggressive drive for efficiencies. Now, the transition from the mess we inherited to that coherent future will be a difficult process, especially in the current economic conditions, but we are determined to take the necessary steps. Our ground forces will continue to have a vital operational role. So we will retain a large, well-equipped army numbering around 95,500 by 2015. That is 7,000 less than today. We will continue to be one of the very few countries able to deploy a self-sustaining, properly equipped, brigade-sized force anywhere around the world and sustain it indefinitely if need be. And we will be able to put 30,000 into the field for a major one-off operation. In terms of the return from Germany, half our personnel should be back by 2015 and the remainder by 2020. Tanks and heavy artillery numbers will be reduced by around 40%. But with the introduction of 12 new heavy-lift Chinook helicopters, new protected mobility vehicles and enhanced communications equipment, this will make the Army more mobile, more flexible and better equipped to face future threats than ever before. We will also review the structure of our reserve forces. to ensure we make the most efficient use of their skills, their experience and their outstanding capabilities. This review will be chaired by Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, General Horton, and with my honourable friend, the member for Canterbury, who has served for many years in the reserves, will act as his very able deputy. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Navy will be similarly equipped to meet the challenges of the 21st century. We are procuring a fleet of the most capable, nuclear-powered, hunter-killer, astute-class submarines anywhere in the world. Able to operate in secret across the world's oceans, these submarines will also feed vital strategic intelligence back to the UK. We will complete the production of 6 Type 45 destroyers, one of the most effective multi-role destroyers in the world. We will also start a new programme to develop less expensive, more flexible modern frigates. Total naval manpower will reduce to around 30,000 by 2015. That is a reduction of 5,000. And by 2020, the total number of frigates and destroyers will reduce from 23 to 19. But the fleet as a whole will be better able to take on today's tasks, from tackling drug trafficking and piracy to counter-terrorism. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Air Force will also need to take some tough measures in the coming years to ensure a strong future. We have decided to retire the Harrier, which has served this country so well for 40 years. It is a remarkably flexible aircraft, but the military advice is clear. We should sustain the Tornado fleet, as that aircraft is more capable and better able to sustain operations in Afghanistan. RAF manpower will also reduce to around 33,000 by 2015. Again, that is a reduction of 5,000. Inevitably, this will mean changes in the way in which some RAF bases are used, but some are likely to be required for the Army as forces return from Germany. We owe it to communities up and down the country who have supported our armed forces for many years to engage with them before final decisions are taken. Mr. Speaker, by the 2020s, the Royal Air Force will be based around a fleet of 2 of the most capable fighter jets anywhere in the world, a modernised Typhoon fleet, fully capable of air-to-air and air-to-ground missions, and the Joint Strike Fighter, the world's most advanced multi-role combat jet. The fleet will be complemented by a growing number of unmanned aerial vehicles and the A400M transport aircraft, together with the existing fleet of C-17 aircraft and the future strategic tanker aircraft. This will allow us to fly our forces wherever they are needed in the world. Mr. Speaker, as we focus our resources on the most likely threats to our security, so we will remain vigilant against all possible threats, and we should retain the capability to react to the unexpected. So as we cut back on tanks and heavy artillery, we will retain the ability to regenerate those capabilities if need be. And while in the short term the ability to deploy air power from the sea is unlikely to be essential, over the longer term we cannot assume that bases for land-based aircraft will always be available when and where we need them. So we will ensure the UK has carrier strike capability for the future. Mr. Speaker, this is another area where I believe the last government got it badly wrong. There is only one thing worse than spending money you don't have, and that is buying the wrong things with it and doing so in the wrong way.